You're listening to TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour, with your host, the Director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
Week on TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour. Our guest, once again, is my dear friend Bob Eoff. Of course, Bob and I go way back, 20-some years. We were going to SCV meetings together back in Texas. And Bob was a bank officer and a bank president at a local bank in a town where I was the pastor. And of course, I can remember going in there and talking to him, eating lunch with him on several occasions. He was the one who got me involved in the Constitution Party way back when. Third party. Some of you may be familiar with the Constitution Party. I'll be honest, I've not really been active with the party for about 10 years now. In fact, the last Constitution Party candidate that I really actively supported was Michael Perotka back in 2004, and I helped to run part of his campaign. And I remember traveling around the country and stumping for Perotka back in 2004. I supported, I guess, Chuck Baldwin when he ran under the Constitution Party banner, but I wasn't really actively involved in the party by that time. But but Bob for years was the treasurer of the Constitution Party, and for about 2 years he was even the state party chairman there in Texas. He ran for the Texas state legislature under the Constitution Party, and just a great guy. He labored tirelessly for years in the Constitution Party, trying to help them to gain ballot access and trying to promote their candidates and so forth. And so in this interview, we kind of share some war stories, if you will, some election time war stories of what it was like to campaign for and to get votes counted for third-party candidates. I actually kind of upset the apple cart in Texas a little bit back after the 2000 election. I had written some newspaper pieces that made their way around the state, basically exposing that votes for third-party candidates were not even being counted in the state of Texas, and that there was just a gross problem with the way votes were being counted and tallied in that state and the way elections were being run. And it actually ended up kind of causing a little bit of an overhaul in the way that certain things were done in that state. But part of that kind of sprung out of some of the war stories that Bob and I will tell during this interview. And of course, we'll also talk about Bob living without a Social Security number and without a driver's license, and how he's been able to do that. And it's been kind of a difficult thing for Bob to do, of course, but he did it as a matter of conviction. And of course, he also, as he'll talk about, his grandchildren, his 4 grandchildren, and their parents, all no Social Security numbers, and the difficulties that created for them. But you say, well, why did they do it? Well, they had very strong convictions. When Bob, as a banker, came to realize really the evil of that whole system, it was a matter of conviction. And I'm saying all these things to say this, that Bob is not the typical radio show guest. Bob is somebody who has lived the things he is preaching, and he's lived them at personal expense. I also say some of these things because there are people in the Patriot community that will be listening to this radio broadcast. Maybe you listened to the last broadcast a couple of weeks ago when we had Bob Eoff as our guest. And they're thinking to themselves that, well, you know, Bob or Bob's grandkids, you know, eventually adopted a Social Security number. And I would never do that. Well, one of the reasons that you are able to live the way you are living right now is because men like Bob Eoff fought the battle for you years ago. And so I want you to kind of get to know the man a little bit, who you probably owe more to than you realize. And not only that, but Bob is a person who has gone to jail for these things. You wonder why some of you are able to kind of live outside of the system, kind of live off the grid, if you will, as easily as you do now. And I'm not saying that you do it easily, but the reason you're able to do it is because men like Bob were willing to go to jail for these convictions. In other words, it wasn't just something that they did as long as it was convenient and then they stopped doing it. I mean, that might be the case for the grandchildren, and of course, that's just the nature of life. But in Bob's case, he's never surrendered his convictions. He's gone to jail for his convictions. He'll talk about that a little bit. And so this is just an interview that even if you're not a person who's trying to live off the grid, you want to listen to this interview because you get to know somebody who has and who is, and you get to find out a little bit about how somebody who was actually a federal bank inspector, the president of a bank, someone who was very mainstream, you say, well, why does he walk away from the grid, if you will? Why does he walk away from the normal whatever of society? And you'll kind of find out why. And what you'll realize is that some of the ideas that are being embraced by the Patriot community aren't as radical or as extreme or as quote-unquote alt-right or whatever you want to tack onto that is the left would have us to believe. I mean, Bob is a college-educated man. He's politically active in the state of Texas. He was the treasurer of a major political party. He was the president of the bank for over 20 years. He was, like I said, a federal bank inspector before he became a bank president. Very mainstream guy. And this very mainstream guy just comes to see the truth of some things, and it changes his thinking politically, and it also changes the way he does some things as far as life decisions. And so not only is Bob somebody who practices what they preach, but he's just an illustration of the fact that a lot of the ideas that are being condemned by the left, by the cultural Marxists and the Bolsheviks, if you will, calling it, again, the alt-right and calling it extremism and whatever they want to tack onto it today. It's really just constitutional government. Because you say, well, what made Bob Eoff come to these conclusions? And as he'll tell us himself, he read the Constitution of the United States of America. He read the Declaration of Independence. He read the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist Papers, which were basically the journals, the scholarly journals, if you will, and the arguments amongst the founding fathers for and against the Constitution. And that's all it is Bob just came to realize that the American vision of government as cast for us by the founding fathers was valid, was correct, was biblical. And it goes from there. So without any more introduction on my part, let's go into our second interview with my good friend, retired banker Bob Eoff. So have you had any difficulty getting, say, automobile insurance, not having a driver's license?
A little bit, yes. But believe it or not, there are one or two companies out there that apparently don't require you to have a current driver's license or not. But they are a little hard to find, I'll grant you that. But it can be done, and the few times I've been stopped, I show my expired driver's license, I show my insurance, and sometimes they'll call in, and they'll tell me what they find out about me. Sometimes they'll call in, and they'll say, okay, go on your way, and sometimes they'll give me a ticket, and I have to pay it.
Right. Well, I don't know what's in the computer about me. All I know is I was in an accident recently, and I was held at the scene for almost 2 hours while a police officer sat on her computer, and like I said, I don't know what all they've got in their computer on me, but it kept her rather engaged, shall I say, reading her computer screen for well over an hour and a half.
Wow.
And to make matters worse, she was a black lady who was just determined that she was going to ticket the white guy, and so she came up with a totally bogus, I'm talking totally bogus, chain of events in the accident report to justify writing me a ticket. Everybody who looked at it, the insurance adjusters, the body shop people, even her supervisor, when he came on the scene, they looked at that and they said that the damage to the vehicles, there's no way her story could have happened. And, her supervisor had even suggested to me that I take that to a judge. He said, unfortunately, once she pushed that button, there's nothing we can do except for let a judge deal with it. But she even wanted to arrest me on the scene, but for whatever reason, she wasn't going to do it herself, and she actually called a supervisor onto the scene and wanted him to arrest me, and he spent however long, reading all of the stuff that was on the computer screen, and decided that he wasn't going to do that. That I hadn't, apparently committed a crime, that would justify arrest. And I just asked the man, I said, if she wanted to arrest me, why didn't she just slap the cuffs on me herself? Why did she call you? And he just looked at me and he said, well, apparently, sir, you intimidate her.
Wow.
Well, if I intimidate her, then she has the wrong job.
Yeah, that's right. That was a good call. Wow. What a story.
Yeah. So I know about, when they run you through their little system, they find out all about you. I know a little something about that. But I know you're going through a battle with your wife, your late wife, and her death certificate, and we'll get to that in a second. But are you undergoing any current driver's license battle right now, or no?
No, not right now. No battle is ongoing at the moment.
From your email, I didn't know if I was reading about an older incident or if that was something that was ongoing. But I'm looking at 42 U.S. Code 666, and it says that the state is required, basically to collect a number now in pretty much any matter referring,
family affairs.
To family affairs. And it also even says, the death certificate. And I know that your wife passed recently, and you were telling me that you were basically having issues with the non-disclosure of her social security number.
Absolutely right. Now, she passed away February the 28th from Alzheimer's. But yes, going back a ways, let's see, I think it was 2008 or 9 when I got stopped and actually hired an attorney at that point. And maybe the attorney influenced the JP. I really think the JP knew me from Lions Club and being a bank customer, and he knew a little bit about my background and faith, and that's why he dismissed the case. But anyway, I ended up hiring an attorney to fight it for me, and he liked my case. He thought I had a good case based on the Texas Constitution, believe it or not, and that's why he took the case. Anyway, so I went to him, I paid him like $2,500. So anyway, when my wife passed away, the funeral home, of course they sit down and ask you a dozen questions, and then of course it always pops up, well, what's your wife's social security number? And I said, sir, I refuse to give that to you. Oh, well, you've got to give it. I said, no, sir, I refuse to give it. I almost thought to myself, I'll bury her in the backyard if I have to. Anyway, we went round and round and round about it. So then, a day or so later, I went back to the same attorney, told him what had happened, and he put a letter to the state Department of Health or whatever it's called, and said he knows my faith, my background, and this is one of those cases where he's not going to provide his wife's social security number. There's babies that die, there's homeless people that die. There are cases where the social security number is either refused or not available on people that die. And he told the head lady in Austin, he says, this is going to be one of those cases. So I showed that letter to the funeral home, and sure enough, they caved in and gave me the death certificate, which I still have. And as a matter of fact, I put a codicil in my will to my kids that when I die, do not give my social security number to anyone except the IRS and Social Security Administration, period. If you do, I'll cut you out of my will. And I hope that they will abide by that. My name is written in the Book of Life, not my Social Security number.
I know you had told me at some point that you had 4 grandchildren that do not have Social Security numbers.
That's correct, but they do now. And the oldest one's 18. I knew someday they would likely get them, and that would be their choice or their parents' choice. But for 18 years, roughly, they did not have numbers. And and my daughter and even my son-in-law, who's a Baptist preacher, he agreed with me for years and years and years, and they got by. It was tough, really tough for a lot of years, but they didn't have a number. But they finally did. 2 of the kids are working for a pizza place, and so, naturally the employers required a number, and I knew someday they'd cave in and get a number, and that's okay. But I protected them for 18 years. Well, the oldest one is 18, the youngest one is 10, but they finally got them all numbers, and that was an ordeal in itself because they were all, half grown, and they had to go through hoops. I mean, get school records, doctor statements, birth certificates, you name it, just to get a number because they didn't get a number early on in life, which, by the way, you don't have to do. Babies come out of the womb nowadays with a smartphone in hand, and their thumbs are just clicking it. And, of course, the nurse or doctor or whoever puts the form in your hands and with a pen and say, sign here, we'll get your kids tattooed with a number on their butt. And believe it or not, you can refuse. But you have to know that up front and say no. But there is no law to this day that requires every living U.S. citizen to have, use, obtain, or apply for a Social Security number. It's technically voluntary, but like I've told people over the years, it's about as voluntary as breathing air. You can voluntarily stop breathing air? Sure, you can do it. But that's what I compare it to, especially nowadays.
Well, I remember first meeting you through some activity that was being conducted by the Constitution Party in Texas.
Okay.
And so was it your involvement in this issue that caused you to gravitate towards the Constitution Party, or was that a totally different set of issues?
No, that was totally different. I gravitated toward the Constitution Party because when I found out about it, liked the platform, liked the folks that were involved with it. They're 99% believers and confessing Christians, but that was a totally separate issue. Although there's a plank in the Constitution Party that indicates the issue that will not be a national ID, but that's really an aside issue.
Are you still a member of the Constitution Party?
Oh, yeah. I've been a member since 1996. I've been treasurer for about 10 years. I was state chairman for about 2 years, and yes, I'm still a member. But I guess over the years, I got burned out, and it seems like the party never taken a foothold, and that's very sad. It's got such a great platform, and the few people that have ever run for office have been, few and far between. They never seem to get the hold, and I think we desperately need a third party to rise up. That's a little bit off the subject of Social Security, but I always put a plug in for the Constitution Party, and people can look it up online, of course. And they're a great party, doing very well in some states, but what I call the ballot access rules are so cumbersome in most of the states, especially states like Texas. It's virtually impossible to get ballot access. Almost impossible. And of course that's for a reason. The Dems and the Republicans, they don't want any competition. They would go to the ring, both parties, to keep any and all competition out. And like I told people when I was running for office back in 1998 for state rep, that I don't mind getting beat. I just want a chance to get in the ring. But most of the time we're denied.
Right. Well, you'll probably remember the incident when I start discussing it. Of course, you remember David McCracken.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time, David was a member of the church I was pastoring, and I remember you and I and David McCracken were eating lunch in, I want to say, Tomball, Texas. But the location of where we were eating the lunch wasn't necessarily important. It might have been in Navasota, where you were the bank president at the time. But again, that's neither here nor there. But I remember it was right after the 2000 election, and I remember we were having a conversation about how we had voted for Howard Phillips the day before. Yeah. And I remember making the statement that, according to the Secretary of State's website, that Waller County, Texas showed 0 votes for Howard Phillips, but I know there was at least one because I had voted for him. And, you had said that there were however many people in Navasota County that you knew had voted for Howard, yourself, your family, and so forth. And even David was saying that in Harris County, Texas, they were only showing 70-some votes for Howard, but process of affidavits from people, saying that they had voted for Howard Phillips, and if he could get more than the 72, affidavits or whatever. He was going to challenge the election results. Well, I remember driving home from that lunch and stopping at the county building there and going into the supervisor of elections office, and they were doing a recount for something. I think it was a county commissioner position or something. They were in the midst of a recount. But I remember getting the supervisor of elections and telling her the story, and because all the news media people were there for the recount, I guess she felt obligated to follow through with this, and they actually found my ballot. They went through all the boxes and they found my ballot where I had written in Howard Phillips's name. And she brought this out to me and she handed it to me and she said, "Is this your ballot?" And I said, "Yes." And, and they amended their results or whatever. But I remember writing an article that appeared in some papers in Texas on how the votes weren't even counted for the third-party candidates.
That's right. Typically, even if they're counted, they don't go reported for at least a week or 2 weeks or longer. Even if they are counted, which oftentimes they're not.
And I remember Channel 11 there in Houston, which, if memory serves, was the CBS affiliate. But I remember the Channel 11 news van was there, and so the guy was interviewing me, and we were standing right out in front of the building and right in front of the van, and I could hear the audio feed coming in from Houston, from inside the van while the reporter was interviewing me. And we were about, 2 or 3 minutes into an interview on the subject, and I could hear somebody from the newsroom in Houston coming across the speaker from inside the van saying, "No one gives a blankety blank about Howard Phillips." And the reporter just cut off the interview. It never made the news.
Not surprised. Just back in those days, it just wasn't newsworthy.
Yeah.
And you're lucky even if you get even a small audience to even listen, but it's not going to make big headlines. And may never will. So sad.
Right. But at least for a while the Constitution Party had some people who you knew who they were. Of course, everybody knew who Howard Phillips was. Everybody knew who Michael Perotka was. Chuck Baldwin, had a bit of a name for himself. I can't even remember the name of the candidate that the Constitution Party put forth in 2016. Of course, the name Trump, just forgive the pun, trumped everybody else as far as publicity and as far as name recognition anyways. But I remember kind of doing a little bit of research on the gentleman, and the best I could tell, he was a slip and fall lawyer from Utah.
But yeah, you took me back a while, but your story about not getting your vote counted. I could tell you a similar story in Washington County, Texas. I lived in Brenham for about 10 years, where they make the unfattening Bluebell ice cream. I think it was, I want to say 2004, I think. Howard Phillips ran 3 times, 92, 96, and 2000, 2004, and I think our candidate was Michael, what was his last name?
Michael Perotka.
Oh, yeah, Perotka, yeah, right. I couldn't remember his last name, but anyway.
And Michael is part of, I want to say he's in the state legislature in Maryland right now, but I think he may be there as a Republican.
Might be. And that's okay. If he goes in as a Republican, but his heart is with the Constitution, I'm okay with that. Sometimes us, believers in the Constitution and they're understanding to be confessed to Jesus, sometimes you have to go in the back door and sneak your way in, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But anyway, back to 2004, it was, I had a pretty good following of people in Washington County and some in Navasota who were members of the Constitution Party, and I supported our candidate at the time. I think it was Michael Perotka. And lo and behold, when the numbers came out after the election, a couple of days later, it showed 0 votes for Michael Perotka. And Constitution showed 0. Well, I know at least 10 or 12 people told me flat out that they voted for Michael Perotka. So I called the county clerk, who I got to know over the years. Her name's Beth Bluffenell. I doubt if she's still there. And I said, Beth, well, hey, it shows 0 here votes for Michael Perotka. I said, I know darn good well my wife and I voted for him, and so did at least 10 others. So what gives? So a few days later, a man called me back, and he was the head bean counter, you might say. And he said, "Oh, sir, I'm really sorry. I apologize. When I turned the machine on, I guess there were still paper ballots back in those days, like you're talking about. Anyway," he said, "Sir, I'm so sorry, but I forgot to turn on the button that counts, sorts out and counts handwritten votes, and that's as far as it ever got. I don't think they ever made an adjustment. We just wanted our 10 votes to count. That's all.
Right.
We know we're not going to win. We just wanted those to count, to send a message to just even a handful of people." But they just ignored it.
Well, you know what convinced me more than anything else that elections are rigged in Texas? And I know they're rigged everywhere, but how I know they have to be rigged in Texas? Do you remember the 2006 election, and it was Rick Perry, and I don't remember the Democrat candidate's name, but I remember the Democrat ended up withdrawing from the race right before the election, and the Democrats did not put up another candidate in his place. And so it was Rick Perry and an independent, Kinky Friedman, the country and western singer.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And Willie Nelson was his running mate. And Rick Perry won by a thin margin. And you tell me that Willie Nelson can lose an election in Texas if it's conducted honestly and impartially.
Well, I forgot all about that, but you're taking me way back.
I mean, it's all but impossible for Willie Nelson to lose an election in Texas unless the thing was rigged against him.
Yeah, you're right there. Yeah, I like Willie. I've heard him sing. I never have met him in person, but I like him. And like I said, I've heard him sing. But yeah, you're so right. The elections are rigged, and like I mentioned on the phone, I think in the last conversation, I think it was Stalin who said, "It matters not who casts the vote. All that matters is who counts the vote."
Well, I can remember this was a number of years ago. I was watching a speech that Fidel Castro was giving, I want to say to the United Nations. But, he made the statement, he said that he was the democratically elected leader of Cuba. That every 6 years, I think he said, that they have an election in Cuba, and his name is on the ballot, and the Cuban people, they dutifully go to the polling places, and they cast their vote for him, and he is their duly elected constitutionally. In the Soviet Union, that, they did the same thing, and, he named off some other countries, China and some other countries, and he said that, I can't remember who it was at the time, if it was Kim Jong-il, or if it was Kim Il-sung. I can't remember who was the leader in North Korea, but he talked about how he was, democratically elected and so forth. And he said that, that these are, proper elections, whatever. He says, and then there's the United States. He said they put 2 names on the ballot, and the stupid Americans think they're choosing.
No, I was just going to say, that doesn't surprise me about Castro, but I started to say, I'll bet he was the only one on the ballot.
Yeah, that was his point, that, that he was properly democratically elected or whatever. His was the only name on the ballot, whatever people voted for him. But in the United States, they put 2 names on the ballot, and the Americans think they're choosing something.
Yeah. Well, they need 3 or 4 names on the ballot. Like some members of our party have said, we need more choices than Coke or Pepsi.
And on that note, we're going to break for a word from our sponsor, the Barnes Review. If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading the Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. Well, Thomas Jefferson said it years ago, the American Constitution was written in such a way so that we could have a bloodless revolution every 4 years, if need be. And he said that if you didn't like the course of the country, he said, vote for the other party, vote for another party. You vote to change the things you don't like. he said if you go through 2 or 3 or 4 election cycles and you're changing parties, but nothing else is changing, there's a conspiracy afoot.
Yeah, I've heard that argument before, but if there's a conspiracy, it's an open conspiracy, and theoretically we have a choice. The choice is: would you like to go off the cliff at 80 miles an hour, or would you prefer to go off the cliff at 90 miles an hour?
Yeah. Well, to some degree, to kind of take that analogy, we've changed drivers now with Donald Trump, but the question is Donald Trump really driving the car, or are they just allowing him to sit in the driver's seat?
Well, I think he's the first one in a long, long time that at least every now and then they'd let him drive the train. Not all the time, but maybe on certain days they said, "Okay, Donald, you can drive the train today." And the next day they said, "Well, we'll just let you sit in the driver's seat." But I think he's done a better job of that than many presidents before him.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and there's no right or wrong answer to this question. And to be honest, I don't purport to know the answer to the question.
Sure.
But the fact that I'm going to ask the question is going to indicate that I have doubts.
Okay. Dude, I'll give you an honest, straight-up question. I mean...
And this was 20 years ago. I remember, going to parties at your house, and you would invite a bunch of people over, and we'd have food and some fellowship, and you'd show Alex Jones videos.
Alex Jones? Oh, yeah.
And I still watch Alex Jones's InfoWars and videos and things, and he puts out a lot of good stuff. But I guess the nagging question that I've had for the last couple of years now, do you think Alex Jones is the real deal, or do you think that he's some type of CIA or government plant that is just designed to keep us all on a mailing list and managed?
Well, first of all, I remember you having me over at my house and pick people, but I have met Alex Jones in person in Dallas years ago, and in my opinion of Alex Jones is he's probably right on a lot of things, but I think on at least some things he's gone off on the deep end, and a lot of people consider him a lunatic, and I'm not sure they were always wrong on that point. But he's right on target on a lot of points, but I don't agree with him on everything. I think he might uncover some little fact here and there, and then he multiplies it 100 times. So I tend to discount a lot of things that he says.
Right.
So that's my honest, straight-up answer to you.
Have you heard about the new movie that he's come out with? I believe it's called Revelation.
Yeah, I think it's coming out on, I want to say August the 4th.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm sure there'll be some good stuff in that.
Let me just pause for a second and say, Ed, I thank you so much for your call. It is so nice talking with you and sharing with you, hearing your stories. And, boy, you're taking me back down memory lane. I'm so glad I still have some gray matter between my ears, and I can still remember some of those things and repeat them. Some of the things I have forgotten, but you're taking me back down memory lane, and you're helping me revive some of those old memories. So for that, I want to thank you, sir.
Well, I'm happy to do it.
And I'm so glad we still have a little freedom left, like freedom of speech. And whoever's listening to this conversation from Homeland Security or whoever, hope you get an earful. And but that's what we've been talking for an hour and a half. So they may have had to go on to walk the dog too.
So, is there anything else that you had wanted to talk about in this interview that I didn't ask you about? Or?
Well, we didn't touch much on I used to call it Socialist Security, but maybe we can save that for another day if you like.
Well, what was it that you wanted to discuss, or that you wanted to say that I didn't give you a chance to?
Okay, well, I made some notes for myself a few hours ago, if and when we got on the subject of Social Security, and I'll just touch on them real quickly, and maybe we have another conversation someday. But Social Security, first of all, it's not insurance. It was sold as insurance, but it doesn't meet the definition of insurance. I can go into detail and would ask your callers to consider reading Irwin Schiff's book on the Social Security swindle, which I think came out about 20 years ago, and I have a copy right here in front of me. And it's a good book. He's lays out a great case, very factual, very straight up. But Social Security, well, first of all, let's say it's not insurance. It's voluntary, like I said before, but it's about as voluntary as breathing air. If you go to work for what I call a regular employer, they're going to require you to have a Social Security number, unless, of course, you're illegal, and then they'll hire you in a heartbeat. I mentioned the fact that when children are born, there's no requirement to get a Social Security number immediately. It's up to the parents. And then the child, of course, someday when they become of age, whether or not they want to volunteer. And let's see. So I signed up for Social Security when I was 15, had my first job. And in my opinion, Social Security is a contract, but it's a one-sided contract. You have to sign and apply, but they never sign. And so there's no negotiations. You either join or you don't join, and you do it their way or the highway. And by the way, the Social Security tax rate is actually 15.3%. That's FICA and I call it Metascam. But the effective rate to people like you and me, and people who have what I call a regular job, is really 15.3%, the effective rate. And here's why I say that, which I think is outlined in Irwin Schiff's book. If I'm an employer and I have to pay half on paper, 6.2 plus 1.35% for each and every employee, then I don't care if you suddenly took that away from me, then I could pay you 7.65%. I could pay you more. The bottom line to the employer is the same. So the effective rate to the employee is 15.3% because they're effectively paying that out of their pocket, even though on paper it leads one to believe that the employer is paying half. And on paper they are, yes, I'll grant you that. But like I said, the effective rate to the employee is 15.3%. And if you're self-employed, you pay both sides. You pay your side and you pay the employer's side. So I hope your listeners will take that in mind, and I'm just trying to speak the truth. But a lot of people don't like to hear the truth, of course.
Well, I can too, a number of years ago, you telling me that the Federal Reserve was neither federal nor did it have any reserves.
Right.
And,
yeah, the Federal Reserve, back on that, Federal Reserve is a private bank. It's not a government agency. You will not find the Federal Reserve listed. If you go to your thick phone book, which I think are still around, I'm not sure. You may have to go to the library to get one nowadays. But if you get a thick phone book and white pages, and you look under U.S. government agencies, you will not find the Federal Reserve Bank. It is not a federal agency, period. It's a private bank owned by mostly what a lot of people call the banksters, and also the member banks that are member banks. All national banks are required to be a member, and then a lot of state banks and savings and loans are voluntary members. But that's the fact. The Federal Reserve is not federal, has no reserves. On the Social Security, back on that, in 1935, when the Social Security Act was passed under FDR and was later found to be constitutional by the Supremes, I think it was a 7-2 vote, after they had lost a couple of rounds in lower courts, the Social Security Act was found to be constitutional. But it's like I say, it's voluntary, about as voluntary as breathing air. But for the last 15, 20 years, I have suggested, well, if Uncle Sam is so intent that you and I are not able to provide for our own well-being in our later years, and if we can't depend on our families and church members, then I came up with the bright idea. Well, if you're going to, force us to have a retirement plan, why not allow people to have an individual IRA? The U.S. government is already familiar with IRAs and how they work. They're set up to handle this. The banks are set up to handle it. So just make us, or make kids nowadays, force them to have their own IRA. And it would be their money and their heirs' money. If a single person works today for 50 years, and then the next month they die, guess where that money goes? It stays in the pot. And by the way, Social Security taxes, if you read the Supreme Court decision where it was declared legal and constitutional, it's considered a tax. In other words, it's just another federal income tax, only with a different name, just to fool people. It's an income tax, and it goes into the general fund. It's not earmarked in any way whatsoever. You can verify that by reading the Supreme Court decision, or you can read Irwin Schiff's books. It's just another income tax with a different name. That's all there is to it. So you pay a federal income tax on wages, but then you pay a retirement tax on top of that. So you pay, the average person pays 2 income taxes, but they're both income taxes. Number one, it's federal, and number two, it's based on income. Tell me that's not a federal income tax.
Right.
So that's my quick piece summary on Social Security.
So is there anything else that you're doing right now as far as political activism, or are you pretty much retired now? Or
Yeah, I've been retired for 9 years. I've got a lot of health issues, but I read the internet. I post on Facebook all the time. I probably spend way too much time on Facebook, but I guess there's worse things I could do. But I'm a stay-at-home kind of guy. I still got a few friends out there that are believers like me, and believers in the good book, and believers in conservatism. Not like rhinos. That's another subject. Rhinos, don't get me off on that. I'm retired, and I like to be retired, doing my own thing. I've got all the money that I need or want, believe it or not. Very few people can say that. I don't want or need any more money. I just want to keep what I've got. Very few people can say that. If I say that, they look at me like I'm crazy. You don't want any more money? Nope. Don't need it. Don't want it. When we get to heaven, there won't be any money. No need for money. It's nice to have. I'll admit that. And money can't buy everything. But someone said, well, I can't buy everything, but it sure is nice to have.
it seems like the whole system is rigged from the cradle to the grave to, to take away. So.
Yep. It's like a French guy that listens to on the radio talk show. Says, he plays this old song from Tony Bennett, I think it's From Rags to Riches, and he says, we all want to go from rags to riches, but the federal government wants it the other way around. They want to be able to take you from riches to rags. Well, I say the federal government, not the federal government totally, but the libertards, want to bring us down to everybody's equal. We have drifted so far from what our founders intended. And I believe this still is a Christian nation. It was certainly founded as such, but we seem to be drifting so far away from our Christian roots and heritage that our founders, the vast majority of which were Christians, intended us, to go on for years and years. But we've drifted so far.
Drifting is documented week by week in a newspaper called the American Free Press. They're one of our sponsors here on TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. So let's pause for a brief word from our sponsor, the American Free Press. If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States. The things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative, independent news source for honest, hard-working, truth-loving Americans. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch. And AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today. Back with our guest, Bob Eoff. Bob, why don't you pick up where we left off?
But when I get to the pearly gates, which I fully expect to, St. Peter, he's not going to say, "Okay, Bob, what's your Social Security number?" He better not ask me for that. Otherwise, I might just refuse it and say, "Send me back to Earth," or, I don't think it's going to happen. But I'll say, "Well, look in your book of life. If you don't find my name." And he said, "Oh, yeah, the book of life. Got it right here." I know I'm getting a little off tangent there and maybe a little too sarcastic, whatever. Anyway, I said I'd tell you the truth. So that's just off the top of my head. I know you look at the big picture and the long-term future, and I know eternity is a long time. Used to be a bumper sticker. I haven't seen one in years and years. It says, "The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing."
So you had said earlier that you had some health problems. What are you going through?
Oh, gosh, I could talk to you for another 5 or 10 minutes, but I guess my health issues started about 3 years ago. Up until that time, I was in absolutely perfect health. I mean, I might have been, one day every 10 years, but all of a sudden I started having health issues. I had shortness of breath, just going back about 3 years ago. My brother-in-law took me to the hospital, and lo and behold, I had a kidney or liver infected twice, and then I had a touch of pneumonia. Turns out I had blood clots, and I forgot now. It takes me back about 3 years, but anyway, I had all these issues, and I've been in the hospital, 5 times in the last 3 years, and rehab units 3 times in the last 3 years. And, I had falls and seizures, and busted my bottom lip in 2 all the way through. I had to have a pretty big operation on that, physical therapy, and I'm in pretty good shape now. I have to use a cane, but my balance is absolutely terrible. I can't hardly stand up or walk very far, and I can't stand on one leg. That might sound crazy, but you see if you can try to stand on one leg for even 5 or 10 seconds. If you can do it, that's great, but I can't do it. I'm going to fall over. Then about 2 months ago, I had cataract surgery, and let's see, I've got skin cancer on the tops of both arms, pretty bad. I can live with the skin cancer, and I can live with the cataracts. I found out about a year or so ago I did not have Parkinson's. One doctor was convinced I have Parkinson's, so I went to another doctor, and he said, well, I'll send you to a test. Well, 4 out of the 5 doctors I've been seeing regularly told me flat out, they said, Bob, there is no test for Parkinson's. But there is. It's only about 4 years old, but there is a test for it, and I took it. It took about 6 hours. But inject you with some kind of atomic fluid and put you under a X-ray machine like an MRI. Anyway, I passed it. I was told that the test is 95% accurate, so I'm taking them at their word, and I'm just so thankful I do not have Parkinson's. And so I'm getting around okay. That has really given me a boost to find out I don't have Parkinson's, and then a recent boost is my cataract surgery turned out pretty good, so I can see much better out of both eyes, so that has changed my attitude, and I'm feeling pretty good about life and myself, and I was down in the dumps and very depressed for a couple of years. But so thank you, Ed, for allowing me to share with you. I know I've rambled on and on and on about my issues, and you can tell me yours if you want to. I'm just on someone. I'm retired and got all day long.
I know that the last bank you worked at was in Princeton, Texas, right?
Yeah, I've been here in Princeton for, it'll be 13 years come November.
So did you position yourself there because that's where you wanted to retire? Or did you retire there because that just happened to be where you were at when it came time to retire?
Well, I found a job here back at 2005 with a small hometown bank, and I worked there about 4 years. I was retired as president, but I retired the day I turned 62. But I moved here, I retired here, and made some good friends here, and it's a nice town. It's really growing. I think the population is like 7,000, I want to say. It's about 35 miles northeast of Dallas. But McKinney, Texas, is about 12 miles away, and it's growing. It's a county seat, and I think the population is up in McKinney, Texas, to about 200,000 now, approaching that. Colony County is a very well-to-do county. It's got the lowest tax rate of all 254 counties, and I know the county judge, other people, and they're doing a great job. But boy, it is growing. It's expected to surpass Dallas County in the next 20 or 30 years, population-wise. It's a very upscale county.
I probably should have asked you a lot of these questions 20 years ago, but, I was younger then and, didn't have...
Yeah, well, that's okay. We're still alive and kicking. And, by the way, talking about getting older, my mother, she'll be 93 in October, and she came up with a saying, I don't know if she's heard it or repeated it, but she was, life is like a roll of toilet paper. The closer it gets to the end, the faster it goes. It's it might be like a Forrest Gump quote. I don't know.
Well,
something you might say.
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear about the Aggie test question?
No.
No, there's a test question on the final exam, and it said in 100 words or less, please explain the difference between apathy and ignorance. So this one Aggie, he wrote down, I don't know and I don't care. He got an A+.
That's a good place to end it for today. I want to thank Bob for being our guest again here on TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. Of course, those of you who listen to other shows, of course, I realize that you're all totally dedicated to TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour, and that I'm the only radio host that you would ever listen to. You never listen to Rush Limbaugh. You never listen to Sean Hannity. You never listen to Laura Ingraham. You never listen to Mark Levin. I know you never listen to any of them guys. But, if you just happen to get in the car and the radio just happened to accidentally be on, and you just accidentally weren't able to reach over and hit the off button. No, seriously though, folks, I hope you are listening to other radio shows. God forbid that I be the only radio voice that you hear during the week. But because I know you're listening to other radio shows, and I know that especially Hannity loves to do the montages, and so we've decided to do a little bit of a montage of sorts. But it's not the typical montage. Back when Kinky Friedman, we talked about him earlier in the interview, back when he was running for governor of Texas, one of the ways that he paid for that campaign was the Kinky Friedman doll. And it was a picture of him in a cowboy suit. The doll, rather, it was a doll, a Barbie doll-sized doll of him in a cowboy suit with a cowboy hat. And there was one of those pull strings on the back, and you pulled the string and the doll would talk. And of course, what it would say were things that Kinky Friedman, was saying on the campaign trail. And so we've put together a montage of sorts, but it's not the typical montage. It's the montage of things that the Kinky Friedman for governor candidate doll with the pull string said.
I can't screw things up any worse than they already are. I'll sign anything but bad legislation. How hard could it be? If you elect me the first Jewish governor of Texas, I'll reduce the speed limits to 54.95. If you don't love Jesus, go to hell. I'm not pro-life, I'm not pro-choice, I'm pro-football. I don't know how many supporters I have, but they all carry guns. My heroes are teachers, firefighters, cops, and cowboys. I'm gonna de-wussify Texas if I gotta do it one wuss at a time. Read my lips, I don't know. I'm not anti-death penalty, I'm anti the wrong guy getting executed. I'm running for governor, not God. Trust me, I'm a Jew. I'll hire good people. Hell yes, it's a Cuban cigar, but I'm not supporting their economy, I'm burning their fields. I support gay marriage. They have every right to be just as miserable as the rest of us. The only two good balls I ever hit was when I stepped on the garden rake. I've got a head of hair better than Rick Perry's, it's just not in a place I can show you. Money can buy you a fine dog, but only love can make him wag his tail. I'll keep us out of war with Oklahoma. Texas has a capital that was built for giants, but it's inhabited by midgets. Why the hell not? Remember, folks, Friedman's just another word for nothing left to lose. Never re-elect anybody. May the God of your choice bless you. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Kinky.
Enjoyed that montage with the Kinky Friedman for governor candidate doll with the pull string, the kinkyisms, if you will. But I want to thank you once again for being our listener here on TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour. Thank you for taking an hour out of your busy week to listen to our program and to spend some time with myself and our guest, Bob Eoff. I want to encourage you to go to my website, www.dixieheritage.net, www.dixieheritage.net. And I want you to look around a little bit, and I want you to just see what all's up there. We've got a great little bookstore there. You can buy some great Confederate pro-Southern materials, some books, some DVDs. But we also have a place where you can sign up to get a free copy of my book, of The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. And I hope that you'll do so. I don't ask for your credit card number. I don't ask for your mailing address. I don't even ask for your name. All you have to do is give me a valid email address, and I will email you a PDF copy of the book absolutely free of charge. This is a best-selling book, and I give you a copy absolutely free. And when you sign up, you'll also be put on our mailing list so that you'll receive every week on Friday the Dixie Heritage newsletter. And if you're not already a subscriber and receiving the Dixie Heritage newsletter, you'll want to go to www.dixieheritage.net, click the newsletter tag, and just look at some of the back issues of the newsletter. And you'll see why you want to get this in your mailbox each and every week. And of course, we send it free of charge. So be sure to do that. And then go to our sponsor's website, barnesreview.org. Check out the Barnes Review. It's a great magazine. A magazine that you need to be reading. And I don't just say that because I'm on the board of editors and because I write for the Barnes Review. It really is a tremendous journal of politically incorrect thought and history. and it's something that you need to be reading on a regular basis. And so check that out as well. And really, really do appreciate you being with us this week. And wherever you're listening from, however you're listening, wherever you're at in the world, come back to this same venue next week and listen to us again. Also, if you go to the www.dixieheritage.net website, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know who our listeners are here on TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour. So until next week, God bless.
Sail on a 2-night Bahamas Paradise cruise from just $149. Cruise and Bahamas resort stay options also available at amazing prices. Call 800-814-7100. That's 800-814-7100.